Some of the words we use every day are carrying stories far older than we realize. Not stories locked away in old books. Living stories. You can find them in the news, in the comments section, in casual conversations with friends, even in the words you use to describe yourself. The strange part is, we use them all the time, without ever noticing where they came from. Some words have become so familiar that we just use the meaning and move on. You feel overwhelmed and you say panic. Sound bounces back and you say echo. Someone who can only see themselves. And you reach for a different word entirely. But what if those words were never just neutral terms? What if they were the remains of stories that once made people shake, weep, and lose their minds? Maybe when we speak, we are not just using modern language. Maybe we are repeating shadows of stories that were born a very long time ago. The reason I want to talk about this today is not simply because word origins are interesting. And it is not to say that Greek mythology was impressive. What matters more is this: why do some stories never end? Why do they survive by becoming words? Why, after thousands of years, do people still reach for the same comparisons when they face the same feelings? Why did a god's name stick to the feeling of fear? Why did a nymph's fate stick to the loss of a voice? Why did a young man's tragedy stick to someone who cannot see past themselves? These are word stories, yes. But they are also stories about how humans make sense of their own inner lives. Let's start with panic. It is one of those words we barely think about anymore. When something suddenly falls apart, when a situation spirals out of control, when fear hits before you even have time to think, we call it panic. What sets this word apart is that it does not just mean being scared. It points to a specific kind of fear, the kind that bypasses reason entirely. Your body reacts first. Your mind catches up later, if at all. That particular quality is what connects this word to a figure from ancient myth. Pan was imagined as a being tied to wild landscapes, open fields, dense forests, animals, and shepherds. Not a god of order or civilization, but something rougher, more unpredictable, closer to the untamed side of the natural world. And the ancients connected Pan to a very specific kind of fear. The kind with no clear cause. A sudden paralysis in the middle of the woods. The sensation of something unseen lurking just behind you. A crowd that loses all composure at once and scatters without understanding why. That kind of fear does not build slowly. It arrives all at once, from nowhere. What makes this interesting is that we stopped believing in Pan a long time ago. But we never stopped recognizing the fear he described. The forest god is gone. The feeling remains. The word outlived the belief. The structure of the emotion survived long after the myth around it faded. So panic is not some ancient superstition preserved in amber. It is the name that stuck to one of the most primal experiences a person can have, the moment when fear moves faster than thought. Next is echo. We use it casually. Sound bounces back in a canyon and we call it an echo. Someone keeps repeating another person's opinions and we use it as a metaphor. But there is a much sadder story underneath this word than most people realize. Echo was a being with an extraordinary gift for language. She could hold someone's attention, fill the air with words, and through those words, build a kind of connection. Then that gift was taken from her. She was left only able to repeat the last fragments of what others said. She could not begin a sentence of her own. She could not speak her own mind. She could only exist at the tail end of someone else's words. The tragedy sharpens when she falls in love. She feels something real and deep, but she cannot say it in her own voice. The best she can do is catch the last syllable. The other person throws out and send it back. Love is one of the most personal things a human being can feel. To feel it and have no language of your own to express it. That is a particular kind of suffering. Eventually echo fades completely. Her body disappears. Only her voice is left, drifting. So this word does not just name a physical phenomenon. It names what remains of a person after they have been hollowed out. The reason this word has lasted is that the experience it describes is not rare. Most people have had moments where they stopped speaking in their own voice and started living inside someone else's language, thinking in someone else's categories. measuring themselves by someone else's standards, responding to someone else's emotions while losing track of their own. Echo is not just about mountains and cliffs. It is about what happens when a person's sense of self slowly disappears. When you hear an echo, you might be hearing more than a sound bouncing off a wall. You might be hearing the long reverberation of a voice that was never allowed to speak first. And that story connects directly to the next word, narcissism. This one has become almost too common. We use it to describe someone who is excessively self-focused, blind to other people, unable to really see anyone beyond themselves. But the reason this word still carries real weight today is that it does not start with simple arrogance. The original image is stranger and sadder than that. Narcissus is described as a beautiful young man. Many people are drawn to him, but he cannot let any of them in. Then one day he sees his own reflection in the water, and becomes completely captivated by it. The problem, of course, is that what he sees is not another person. It is himself. What we often miss about this story is that Narcissus is not just admiring himself in a mirror. He is mesmerized by something he can never actually reach. The image is right there, but it cannot be touched. It looks like closeness, but it is an impossible distance. That looks like self-love from the outside, but at its core, it is a story about isolation, about someone whose gaze has turned entirely inward, and lost the ability to land on anyone else. He is not falling in love with himself. He is becoming trapped inside himself. The attention that should reach outward keeps circling back. The feeling that should move toward another person burns out against his own surface. That is why narcissism still resonates so strongly. Self-respect is necessary, but the moment a person can only look at themselves, they start to lose the world. Other people become scenery. Other people's pain becomes background noise. Eventually, the person cannot even fully understand their own emotions, because emotions only become real through contact with others. What looks like confidence on the surface is actually a severed connection. Narcissus's story is not a tale of vanity being punished. It is a portrait of what happens when someone loses their bridge to other people and slowly disappears into themselves. So when we apply this word to someone, we are not just saying they love themselves too much. We are, without quite knowing it, naming a very specific kind of loss. At this point, a pattern starts to emerge. Panic, echo, narcissism, all three are rooted in emotion. Fear, the loss of a voice, becoming trapped inside the self. The way mythology survives in language is not as decoration from an old civilization. It survives as the framework for feelings humans keep experiencing over and over. The era changes. The fear, the heartbreak, the self-deception do not. Now consider the word mentor. It barely needs explanation at this point. It brings up images of someone who guides you, someone with experience who helps you find your footing. What is interesting about this word is that its warmth was never separate from its responsibility. A mentor is not just someone who knows a lot. They are not someone who makes decisions on your behalf. At the center of what this word means is the idea of standing beside someone who cannot yet see the whole path and helping them see it for themselves. This word has endured because our lives are full of those moments. When we face something for the first time, the first real job, the first serious failure, the first time the responsibility falls entirely on you, the first time no one is going to decide for you. In those moments, people remember not the person who gave them the answer, but the person who stood with them while they found it. Mentor carries a relational warmth that goes beyond instruction. It implies someone who believed in your potential before you did. That a figure from an ancient story became the name for that role is, genuinely, a beautiful thing. Some names survive not because they belong to someone powerful, but because they belong to someone who helped someone else grow. Then there are the sirens. We carry two versions of this word at the same time. One is the symbol of dangerous, irresistible temptation. The other is the sharp sound that cuts through everything to signal an emergency. The fact that both meanings live inside one word is fascinating. Originally, the sirens were beings whose song pulled people toward them. But the song was not simply beautiful music. It had the power to dissolve judgment in whoever heard it. Beautiful from a distance, deadly up close. The core of what they represented was not prettiness, but the inseparability of attraction and danger. Why did this word also come to mean an alarm? It seems odd at first, but it makes a kind of deep sense. The sirens were never just pleasant to hear. They commanded attention. They stopped people in their tracks and changed their direction. A modern siren does exactly the same thing. It cuts through the ordinary flow of life and demands an immediate response. The beautiful song became a sharp alarm, but the essential quality, the power to seize a person's attention completely, never change. So the word holds both meanings, because both meanings are versions of the same thing. Whether you move toward the sound because you want to or because you have to, the sound takes you off the path you were on. The reason this word feels especially alive today is probably that we live surrounded by sirens. Endless stimulation on screens, headlines designed to make you click before you think, things that look smooth and pleasant and easy, but end up costing you your focus, your time, your clarity. Today's sirens are not out on the water. They are in your pocket, on your desk, on every glowing screen. That is always on. So this word no longer belongs to ancient myth alone. It describes a structure of temptation that is very much part of daily life. And then there is tantalize. We use it to mean teasing someone, holding something they want just out of reach, keeping someone in a state of near satisfaction that never quite arrives. The reason this word feels so immediate is that the image behind it is almost unbearably precise. Tantalize stands in water, but when he bends to drink, the water pulls away. Fruit hangs just above his head, but when he reaches up, the branches lift out of range. He is thirsty and surrounded by water. He is hungry and surrounded by food. The torment is not deprivation. It is the permanent nearness of something that will never be given. This is one of the oldest kinds of human suffering, and one of the hardest to endure. Having nothing at all is painful, but being shown exactly what you want, made to believe it is almost within reach, and then having it pulled back, that is a different category of pain entirely. We know this from love, from recognition, from ambition. The state of almost but not quite keeps a person alive on hope, while simultaneously making that hope the source of prolonged suffering. Tantalize carries a specific cruelty in it, the act of showing someone what they desire, without ever letting them have it, of raising expectations, and then holding them permanently just short of fulfillment. This word hits particularly close today, perhaps because the modern world has become extraordinarily skilled at doing exactly this. Everything is designed to seem just one step away. One more purchase, one more scroll, one more try and you will get there. People cannot stop because the promise never fully closes. The word describes an ancient punishment, but the experience it names is woven into the fabric of how desire is managed in contemporary life. Tantalize is a figure from a very old story. The kind of suffering he endures feels remarkably current. By now the pattern is clear. These words did not survive by accident. They did not last simply because the stories were famous. They lasted because they captured specific, recurring moments in human experience. Panic holds the shape of fear that arrives without reason. Echo holds the shape of losing your own voice. Narcissism holds the shape of becoming trapped inside yourself while losing everyone else. Mentor holds the shape of the guidance that makes growth possible. Siren holds the shape of the moment when attraction and warning become the same sound. Tantalize holds the shape of desire that stays permanently out of reach. This is not a list of words. It is closer to a map of the ways people come undone. Knowing this, then, is not about adding an interesting fact to your collection. It is about touching the texture of feelings that have been worn smooth by overuse. Some words get repeated so often that their meaning wears away. But when you recover the story behind a word, the word sharpens again. Panic stops being a vague sense of overwhelm and becomes the name for a very specific kind of rupture. Echo stops being a physical phenomenon and becomes the lingering trace of a person whose voice was taken. Narcissism stops being a casual insult and becomes the name for a genuine tragedy. When that happens, the words we use every day stop being just convenient shortcuts and start functioning as a way of actually seeing people. It makes me think about what a strange and extraordinary invention language is. People disappear, gods disappear, empires fall, cities crumble. Whatever people in ancient times truly believed, most of it eventually blurs into silence. But words remain, and the words that remain carry their original feelings with them, thin as a shell, passing from one era to the next. So without ever meeting the people who came before us, we can sense, through the words they left behind, how they feared, how they loved, how they fell apart. Language is not a museum of dead things. It is a place where old emotions are still breathing. And when you go deeper, this is not really about the triumph of Greek mythology. It is closer to evidence that human beings cannot fully understand their own lives without stories. Facts alone are not enough. When we try to explain fear, we reach for a shape, a figure, a scene. Why does this dread feel so irrational? Why does this emptiness not go away? Why can I see through this temptation and still not resist it? Why does this person seem completely unable to see outside themselves? Why did that one person change the entire direction of my life? Numbers and rules do not answer those questions fully. So for a very long time, people have been making stories, and over time, those stories compressed into words. The fact that mythology is still alive inside everyday language means that at the deepest level of how humans understand the world, the story form is still there, still working. That is why, whenever I come across these words, I feel that language is not just a tool for communication, it is a memory device that human beings built to keep themselves from forgetting who they are. The background is completely different now. The tools are different, but the part of us that trembles in front of fear, that loses its judgment in front of love, that crumbles in front of the right temptation, that can only take the next step with someone beside us, that part has not changed so much. The mythology did not simply survive. The emotions it described never went away. The words are still here because the people who need them are still here. The language we use every day may be carrying far more than we think. But those old presences are not here to frighten us. They are here to quietly say what you are feeling right now is not new. Someone stood in the same place a very long time ago, and trembled, and wept, and was pulled off course, and waited. So the next time you hear the word panic, do not just think of fear. Think of the very old human effort to give a name to dread. That arrives without explanation. When you hear echo, think past the bouncing sound to the trace of a voice that was never allowed to speak first. When you hear narcissism, think less of vanity and more of the isolation that hides behind it. When you hear mentor, remember that what changes a person is rarely the right answer, and almost always the right company. When you hear siren, notice that the beautiful pull and the urgent warning are often coming from the same direction. And when you hear tantalize, consider that the thing which keeps people suffering the longest is not absence, but the hope that almost, just almost, something is finally within reach. From that moment on, language changes. It is no longer just a system of signs pointing at meanings. It becomes something older and more alive, a mirror that shows us what it means to be human, built from a very long time of people trying to put their feelings into words. And when we look into that mirror, we see ancient figures looking back at us. And alongside them, with a recognition that is almost unsettling, we see ourselves.